What's up, team? Welcome to the Huddle, your weekly playbook helping you gain forward progress in your flooring career. We're here to help you win. For our new viewers, welcome to the team. Speaking of team, we're down. Oh, he just pops up.
He's there.
He's there. We got Jose and Daniel Gonzalez as always. Gentlemen, how you guys doing?
Good, sir. How are you?
Doing good. I'm doing awesome. Just braving the cold and snow, and
Yeah,
I think we got a total
16 degrees here today.
Ooh.
Can you guys hear me okay this time?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Just want
we
to make sure
got
I'm
you.
not too loud.
We got 35 at this point, so we're doubling you up. But man, it's going to be cold at the end of the week, and we've gotten a crap ton of snow for our area. So, all right, well,
Still isn't bad over here. Normal, I guess. But you get spoiled when you get that little bit of melt. And, if it's 35 over here, my son is walking around in shorts like it's spring.
Yeah,
that's just kids.
That's teenagers for you. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us this week. If you wouldn't mind doing us a great favor, and if you're catching us live, join in on the conversation, get involved. We're going to be talking about something that I'm sure all of us have dealt with, and that is pretty much settling conflict between, the installers and the clients, whether that be a GC or a homeowner or whatever. So we're going to kind of break it up into the different time frames. So join in, tell us about a dispute you may have had, and we'll talk about it. And then we'll just talk about, like always, we have our own experiences we'll bring to the table about some different times when we may have gotten in a...
Yeah, because we were all installers at one point, and then it's that one of those things where you don't realize it until later on. It's like, yeah, I probably could have handled that a lot differently.
Yeah, but and hindsight's always got that 20/20 on you, and you learn a little bit. And if you got through one that was incredibly difficult and wouldn't mind sharing with the rest of us how you did that, that would be awesome. So if you're catching us live here, join in on the conversation. If you're catching us on YouTube or one of the social media channels, make sure to give us a like and subscribe. Your love over the last year has been noted and recognized. We've got thousands upon thousands upon thousands of views in the flooring industry. We are very excited about our future here at the Huddle. And speaking of that, we're going to be at TICE this year again, and we're going to be walking around doing some key interviews, checking out some education sessions, as well as, just giving you guys insight into TICE again. With that, let's get moving on to the topic of the day: settling debates between installers and clients. So, I thought it'd be good just to kind of put some framework around a debate. This goes from anything, right? You can have a debate or, a disagreement with a client on how the project was going to go, schedule. There's, construction is very fluid and tough because you've got so many of these things. You go to a convenience store and have a transaction. There's only a few things you can really not enjoy. You know what I mean? Like the person or the price of the product. They all have the same products. With us, you could be schedule, delivery, the installation quality, the quality of the product itself, payment, timely payment, getting any number of things. So one of the biggest things I'm going to pull from is some surveys or some studies that we've ran on some of this. May not be exactly like a linear line to our listeners because we're all very professional. But if you look at the most negative reviews from customers from places like Angie, for example, the number one thing is about money and the quality and not feeling like they got paid or that they got what they paid for. On the other side of that, you see the installer, uh, you can see the installer and their side of it. And a lot of times it's like expectations that this client had versus what they bid. So I think that's the first thing that comes out is setting the expectation. When the client has an expectation that's this high and it's impossible to meet no matter how hard you work, that's where I've seen a lot, and I've gotten myself into a lot, like telling somebody when I was installing, yeah, I'll have these 3 rooms done by Monday, no problem. Yeah,
Oopsie.
there's a problem, right? Something didn't go right. The patch didn't dry. The glue wasn't setting up as fast as the bucket says, whatever. And those are the scenarios I've gotten myself into. And I typically was dealing with GCs, but what I'm kind of would love to start with is homeowners. I've done a handful of homeowner jobs or residential projects direct with the end user. We do maybe 5 or 6 a year, and we have always approached those by just setting clear expectation and making sure we get money up front. We have a payment schedule with them. Hey, you're gonna if it's a bigger project, you're gonna pay us this much at this time, at this time, at this time. And so we always hit those payment schedules. And if you miss one, and that's also their chance to kind of tell us what they don't like about what's going on. That's worked out pretty well. But a few times I've not been paid. One time comes into mind, and then I want to hear some war stories from you guys. You do a fair amount of residential, I know, but carpet, it was my fault because I scheduled the install like just a day or two after the carpet was supposed to come in for a residential project. And, the lady took off vacation. I think I've told this story before.
Yeah.
It shows you how big of an A chewing I took. But, she took her vacation for this, had boxed up all the stuff, and then her carpet didn't come in. And it didn't come in for 3 extra days. So the question is, how do you deal with that stuff? Do you give them money back? I can tell you how I dealt with it, but how do you guys see those types of scenarios? Like, how do you deal with stuff like that?
Well, first of all, be honest on what happened, right?
I did. I blamed everyone else.
I think, especially the COVID era was super, you're looking at all these timelines and it's just honesty up front. It's, guys, it said it was supposed to be here last week and I still have not seen it. That's where we kind of start managing just our schedule and being like, I'm not going to schedule you until I got something in hand because of the way things have been.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this happened a couple times where even if you do get a ship and delivery date, there's still variables to factor in. And like Daniel just said, because of that instance, it's very hard for us to guarantee dates based off of a schedule, especially if they're requesting time off. And residential, you're displacing a family. Commercial, depending on what size the project is, and you might have a little bit of a window to get it done, right? Like a window of opportunity versus very strict days.
A day, yeah.
Yeah, and
yeah, but those windows are like hard windows too, though, because
Yes.
you guys do schools. School has to open. Like, you might miss a few vacation. That's where it kind of gets. I don't know which one's harder. I wouldn't even try to say which one's harder, but school is going to open. And you're either going to get the floor in or they're going to hire somebody who's going to get some floor in. And you may have to go tear that floor out to get the right floor in when it comes in or whatever the problem is. So, yeah, the homeowner, though, I found you've taken a butt chewing from a general contractor, right? Like, they can get mean, but there's still a little professional side to it. Man, I've taken chewings from homeowners, like all all things were on the table to call me. Or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like it got personal.
Well, they don't have anyone to
Right.
answer to, so it's easier for them to just out whatever they want, right? Because you think about it too, and it's like with a GC, and it's weird because with a GC, they're more professional, but you can look at it like I can push them back a little bit more than when you're dealing with the homeowner, right? When the homeowner can be as much of an a-hole as they want to you, and you still got to look inside yourself and be like, don't say what you want to say.
Yeah.
This is where Chat GPT comes in if you got them, right?
Yeah.
But
Can't do that live. Let me,
it's
hold on. Let me,
so
Ha-
there
ha-
was one that we had, and it wasn't very long ago where, there was some disputes going on, and they ended up calling the office phone, and I talked to them, and I was probably on the phone with them for half hour, 45 minutes or something like that, and it was his project. And it's
yeah.
like it's nice to get an outside perspective because I didn't know about the project other than the few little details that he gave me, and I was able to kind of calm her down and let her know that, hey, this is who we are, this is what we don't do, and what we are going to do. Like, this is, we pride ourselves on our professionalism. And at the end of that conversation, she was like, I am so glad I got to talk to you. I am going to give, the installer and Jose a call tomorrow or tonight. I don't remember what she said, but she was like, it is nice to have that outside perspective because you weren't dealing with it. So thank you for everything that you said. And it kind of made her look at things from that different perspective too, because it's always them versus me, and you're
Mhm.
going back and forth like
well,
that.
and
And then
that brings up a great point. I mean, the point there is that the store has to have, like, don't just throw the installer under the bus right out of the gate. Like if somebody calls and they've got a problem with their job, and maybe something going on they don't agree with the installer or something, and they call the office. I mean, that's essentially what happened, right? They called you,
yeah,
and then your job is to not just toss your guy under the bus, but to help the home, like help the two sides come together,
right. And also
actually settling the debate.
be empathetic with the homeowner too, right? Because it's like, I understand how you're feeling because this is your home, this is your pride and joy, right? This is what you've built. So, and they're spending a lot of money on, even if it's a small project, right? We don't know what cost is a lot to someone. So every project is like that. And it's like, I know that
Hmm.
you're spending your hard-earned money on this, so let me empathize with you a little bit and lead you in the direction where we want to know that you are taken care of.
Yeah.
And that's really what it was too, right? It wasn't that, that what the conversations between the homeowner and I weren't very different than her and Daniel, except for Daniel had no stake in it, right? He had no reason
Sure,
to lead
that's
her in any
normal.
direction. He listened to her side and said, well, this is what we typically do. This is how we typically operate. And then it came from a neutral party who wasn't involved in the last 2 days of conversation. You know what I mean? And
Hmm. Yeah, I
at
got.
that point, it's hard to find balance when it's already so offset one direction.
Yeah, that happens a fair amount in commercial companies
Yeah.
with, like, the manager, like or the owner of the company, like myself, and then my project managers. A GC or someone may not feel like they're getting the enough attention or whatever it is. They call me, and almost always out of their mouth, "I'm not trying to tattle here. I just wanted to chew on your ear for a second." I hear that type of a tone and that type of an approach from people a lot. And most of the time, it's not that the project manager has done anything that wrong, so to speak. A lot of times it's just that they need that outside voice to help them understand without feeling like they're talking to a PM trying to sell them on the same understanding. So they just need an outside voice that may say, hey, whatever the issue is, for example, guy's not showing up. And I'm like, well, let me chat with, my project manager and see what happened. Were they scheduled? Well, I called him yesterday. Okay. Well, sometimes it takes a little bit more time than just one day to mobilize a commercial crew. They're all on a job somewhere. I'll use Jim. I'll just call him Jim. They're all on a job somewhere, Jim. And so they're not just waiting. And I'm sure that our PM is doing everything they can to get them mobilized as soon as possible. Well, he hasn't called me back. And the point is that customers can jump to conclusions, and they do that a lot. And the more that, if you're the one taking the call, you can tamper down the emotion and get them to reality that, like, hey, this PM, XYZ PM, has no benefit to not taking care of you. Like, he wants to do your job. He wants to get your job done. Communication and all that stuff is very important. I'm sure he'll be calling you back soon. It's one of the reasons why we work really hard at our company to try to get customers called back within, just a few hours. They just think you're ignoring them. And that's another thing. I think at the end of the day, no matter who the customer is, if they feel ignored or unimportant, so how can you make them feel important?
Well, it's the same thing. Like when I put on that hat, right, and I am the customer, I'm the client. I call and I'm communicating because I want results, right? And I try to think about it that way too, just myself. Like, I need results. Like, why is this charge on my card? What is this invoice for? You didn't fix my car. My car's still, I'm thinking of all the different scenarios, and I try to factor all of that in too. And
yeah, you got to put yourself in the customer's shoes.
Yep, and that goes with commercial, residential. Do our best to keep all aspects in mind when we're having a conversation, and we try to help our crews communicate the importance of sticking to the guidelines of the installation and trying to maintain a schedule and trying to factor in all of that. We try to do our best to do that, but it's not always rainbows and butterflies in the land of construction. I know that for sure.
And that's the thing too. It kind of gives you a different perspective when you're talking to other customer service people. And I kind of start, because you get heated. And a lot of the times I'll say, I know this is not your fault, but this is what has happened to me. So I'm sorry if I sound like I have an attitude, but it's not directed towards you. And I kind of start out that way. And that's based on the conversations that I've had, having to deal with stuff like this.
Yeah. Well, your car is a great example. If your car's in the shop, and one of my PMs had his vehicle in the shop, and we were talking about a job, and he said, well, he just called me, this morning, and I'm trying to get him the answer. And I said, well, if your truck's in the shop right now, if you call them and you want an answer about something and they don't call you back, at the very least, would you rather them call you and say, hey, I won't name him out, but hey, your vehicle is waiting on a part and I haven't received the ETA on that part yet. I will call you as soon as I get it. Is that better, or just waiting until you get the part and saying, hey, your part's in? And so people just want to be communicated with and know that you care about them and know that that they matter to you. Same thing on the install world. I mean, we're off in kind of the office setting, but man, as an installer, it was a lot different because you feel attacked. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you go on these groups and you see some of these guys that are like, my client said this, and they like went off on them, and it's like, man, there's different ways to approach things, and sometimes it is that outside perspective. You have to look at, what if this was happening to you, right? How would you want to be treated? And I think that's just one of the mentalities of flooring installers or construction guys in general, right? And that's why a lot of these guys are like, I don't need training because I already know what I'm doing. It's kind of those same guys are the ones that get super hot-headed because they already think that they know everything.
Yeah, you got to take I agree. You got to take that step back and try to put yourself in the customer's shoes for just a second. Consider for just a second that you could have done something better. And that's where you're like, be honest, and you might be able to get yourself, through the scenario. And there's so many you can't without bringing up specific times. Um, typically for me, it's been schedule and getting done what you want to get done. Um, for example, I was doing a high school. I was laying it was about 10, 11,000 yards of carpet, broadloom carpet in a high school. And, you're working along the classrooms I'm banging them out. I'm doing 5, 6 classrooms a day, 600 yards a day. Um, but still not, it's like once the contractor got acclimated to that, he didn't appreciate the fact that a 3-man crew was tossing down 600 yards of carpet and wanted more. Even in some of the scenarios where we were able to give him a little more, part of the headbanging started coming when other trades were there. And that starts happening. That happens in even new build residential where you're supposed to go in and do it and you're promising something, but you can't get started for 2, 3, 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
That has to be added. That duration, you gave them essentially a duration and they still, half a day from you. They have to realize you're probably going to be a half a day later than what you said. That kind of goes back to hindsight being 2020 and communicating. Hey, I lost 4 hours this morning because your electrician was in the way. I'm gonna be 4 hours on Monday or whatever the scenario
Yep.
is.
There's a carryover, brother. Carryover. Like, hey, I can't make that up in one day, right? You've already taken half my day, and
Can't
we're
you
trying
just
to
work
accommodate.
longer?
Yeah, just work. Call more people.
Yeah. Yeah, we need more guys. That's another
Need 20 guys to do this one room.
fight I get into with general contractors. We just need more guys. I'm like, more guys is not going to solve the problem at all.
Mm-mm.
Not at all.
More guys are
You
gonna be
got two.
waiting.
You have 2 bathrooms, and by the time this guy gets the crew, the installer going and layout done, and he's in the other bathroom, like more guys are just going to be in each other's way, and then you got the way that each installer lays a little bit differently,
Yeah.
and that's going to play into it. I'm like, you don't want 10, 15 guys in these things. It's incredible all of the times that you get into these scenarios. It's incredible how blinders, and we got to remember from the install, putting back on your installer shoes, like the blinders that customers get sometimes, though, they just are furious, and you are going to take it. And I guess the question is, can you take it without losing your cool? Or
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Right? Because everybody's got their life at home. Everybody's got their issues that they're dealing with, and some days that trigger is just a little bit touchier than others. And and it all depends, I guess, how old is your relationship with said client or contractor? How well do you guys know each other? Because knowing when to approach someone with an issue, or if someone knows you and they see the look on your face as they're approaching you and they have an issue, it might be a dead stop and shoot a text, hey, come and see me when you have a minute. And that's the benefit of creating relationships and being able to work alongside of the same companies with the same teams all the time. But Daniel has stopped me long ago from raging out for sure. Well, I'll just say that I'm usually pretty cool until someone tries to put us in a situation that we shouldn't have been in, right? Though it's not our fault, and maybe we were promised something, and I stand up for us, and then they come back and they get defensive, or they start yelling at my guys, like, can't do that around me. Like you can't. I go into protector mode, and and maybe I go overboard. If you're going to be times 10, I'm going to be times 20. So, and that's who I was back then. I don't know if I'm like that now anymore as much, but Daniel
Well,
definitely stopped a couple of instances. I'll just go that way.
you can certainly get farther with a little bit of, well, they say, sugar than vinegar or honey than vinegar. Um, I think it's true, but just knowing how to talk to people, if that's one of the things I think that we lose when we don't value education. When you go through trainings and such, you a lot of the different certification programs will talk about this kind of thing and teach you how to communicate with people. Communicating with people and giving them a way out to be right, but you still accomplish your goal. Um, they say it's a form of manipulation, right? But there's good and bad manipulation, right? If you're manipulating, just means you're trying to get somebody to do something you want them to do. Well, then we manipulate every day, all the time, all of us. You know, I'm trying to constantly get my kid to do his homework. I gotta, you know, I gotta figure out a way to line up incentives and talk to him in a way that it makes sure that it resides. Uh, if I'm dealing with a homeowner or a, a, a client that's upset, I need to. Sometimes manipulation's the best thing. It's not a bad thing. It's like understanding their side of the deal so that I can respond appropriately in the best fashion. So it's not always a bad term. I wanted to get that out there because a lot of times you're trying to just communicate with them in a way that they know you have their best interest and you're not trying to do nothing wrong. Half the time I feel like they have a distrust. And for any homeowners who are on here, like the tradespeople aren't always trying to screw you. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I think that where people get really defensive is when they feel like their character's attacked. I know that's where
That's it right there.
I'll get defensive is if my character or my company's character, like, are you start saying we're this and that, we're going to have a discussion because like that's not in what we do. Yes, people can make mistakes and we may have made a mistake. We may have let us work together to identify where we could do better, but certainly don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's
Right.
those
Yeah.
kind of scenarios that really bother me.
And I think that's what we don't realize, right, is that everyone's human and homeowners, GCs, like if they see an issue, they just get so angry all the time because you're a professional. You shouldn't be making any mistakes, but man, we're human too. So that's just the nature of what we do. We're gonna make some mistakes. Give me some time so I can fix it. It's at the end of the day, you're gonna have a product that's gonna perform, and that's really all that should matter.
Yeah. Yep. And that you actually care, you know, from an installer
Yeah.
standpoint, like I said earlier, when you're personally attacked though, that gets tough.
Well, so I want to add to that what you just said too. The personal attack, you're right, and I think that's where frustration comes in on a project, residential, commercial, is when someone is attacking the integrity, and even though you are putting forth the amount of effort needed or required or above and beyond to make sure the project is going good or is installed properly, and the things that we can't get back is something like time. It's taking too long to dry. I can't change that. I'm doing everything I can on my end. But the being able to bring yourself down a couple notches and bring the client down a couple notches before progressing with the conversation as to why and how can we
Hmm.
fix this, and
I think
let's meet in the middle. Meet in the
another
middle. Don't
part of
want you to
that
win.
is another part of this whole thing you just said, Jose, is that um, often I got better at this at like talking through uh, difficult scenarios with customers when I realized I quit like desiring their appreciation for what I've done. It's our job. It's what we're supposed to do. Like, if you agreed to it, you already made the agreement. The agreement's done. The appreciation was back there. Now you doing the thing you agreed to do. There's no appreciation, guys. Like, you're not going to get some additional appreciation, or you shouldn't expect it. Not that you don't ever have that homeowner comes up and gives you $500 or $100 or something and says, man, you did awesome. I appreciate it. That's still the exception and not the rule.
Not the rule. Yeah.
Yeah. For the most part, people pay you and they expect a service back that exceeds their expectation. And as installers, a lot of times we're like, well, and we still get this from our subs sometimes. Well, man, what about the weekend? I just worked this, I did that and that. I'm like, bro, I gave you the timeline that you had to do the job, clearly laid out what had to be done, drawings, specs, everything. And we met on the job and went through all this. And now I just need you to do what you said you would do for the price you said you'd do it. And that is the same thing that homeowners want, right? They have an agreement. They want you to do. Now, don't get me wrong. There's just those bad apples out there. And sometimes bad apples, you know, part of this discussion is walking away. We fired clients before. We've got a couple of contractors we won't bid, you know, and we've in essence fired them, just decided we're not going to do business with you.
Yeah. I mean, it was, we had one not too long ago where, you know, a contract came through and I'm reading through it and I'm like, I'm not going to sign this unless you change this. And they said no. And I said, okay, you can move on to the next person then. It's that easy.
Yeah, I've had that happen plenty of times. And that is the benefit you have in commercial, is that you can kind of see how they're going to be, or at least what they're going to hold your feet to the fire on by the contract. In residential, there's not as much structure around it, and you're going off of a signed quote, but it doesn't have 22 pages of terms and conditions that what you're going to follow and what they're going to follow. So yeah, it's kind of a different beast in that way. But I did find a lot of relief when I quit thinking like they owe me something for doing
your job.
Look how great look how great this looks. Yeah, it should look great. I should do that.
You're professional. You know, Daniel and I have done some projects just to say we've done them. We knew we weren't going to make any money. We probably lost money on some of the labor, but just to have that under our belt, like, people said it couldn't be done, and we're like, watch this.
Let me show you.
Gatorade. Hold my Gatorade. Let me do this. Let me do this.
Yeah, so
you know, it's just for to build that internal reputation, right? To up your level of integrity for yourself and expectation for yourself.
Yeah. So what's your real life advice to the installer out there grinding away, whether it's in the residential or commercial world, and you know, just grinding away, but runs into a hammerhead of a person that's just dragging them through the dirt? And often it's going to be around money. If it didn't have money involved, we just shut our ears off and work. But often they're threatening not to pay you or whatever.
I think I probably had more of those clients than Daniel has. And in the past, I've tried to deal with all of that instead of letting someone else having to deal with it, right? Got thick skin. Advice for that is for one, know that you're not always right. And even if you think you are, or if you know you are, do not lead the conversation with that chip on your shoulder.
I like what Alex, I mean, you know, if Alex, he just commented here and said he has a 22-page contract for residential and commercial, and he don't play around, approved by a lawyer. Has it kept you out of, have you been able to leverage that document, Alex, to get you through some of the disagreements? I'd be interested to know if you've been able to say, Mrs. Smith, on page 15, it clearly states this. I'm doing it by the book.
Right.
Let me know if that.
got us out of some jams sometimes because even commercially, where if they don't have a contract, and they're going by our proposal and it's clearly spelled out what is going on, and then they come back and they're like, I thought you were going to do this. And I'm like, read this. I mean, you sign this. Like, you don't
Yeah.
sign
That
it if you're not going to read it.
we leverage that a lot in the commercial world. As you know, it's site conditions. And even though, our great sponsor, FloorCloud, they solve a lot of those problems with site conditions, being able to just have them at your fingertip. At the end of the day, though, the site conditions is a lot of what we get into fights with, and then we have to tell the contractor, like, look, read the specs, read the contract that your contract to me states that X, Y, and Z. And we've had to leverage that before, but we don't have the benefit of sending a general contractor our contract. That only happens when we're dealing with an end user.
Right. And we've actually had some of the GCs actually incorporate everything that we have into the actual contract too.
Yeah, we ask them to at least, scope in the scope of work, make sure that, just stuff that comes up. But most times it's floor prep and floor protection. Those two things are they always try to get them in there. And I'm always having to mark them out and say, I'll provide floor protection for you, but I'm not going to do what follows that, which says I'll replace any damage for free.
Oh yeah,
Because I don't have control over who's on the job site. I don't have control over the schedule. I'm not the sheriff of the job.
So
You're not going to let me tell the electrician you can't be in that area that day. You are running the schedule. So if the electrician has a lift on my 10-hour-old resilient floor, like, we're going to have some problems. But I can't. No craft paper is going to keep that from happening. So we always have to mark out floor protection of floors. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. We install once.
Application. Yep, one-time application.
Yeah, so those are the types of things we have to fight with, but we also get to leverage our contract because, they can't put in writing, although we have had contracts, just like you said, Daniel, where we are like, I walked away from a nice job, but their contract was just too aggressive. It tells me they're jaded. Is that how you feel when you read a contract that's like trying to cover all these scenarios and put you in you're always, because contracts, at least in Kansas, are supposed to be mutually beneficial. They're supposed to be a mutually beneficial agreement. And when I enter a contract to read it, I'm going with that mindset. I'm going to have to give up some stuff, but I should get some stuff. And it shouldn't just be the dollar figure on the page. It should be the arrangement and the agreement. This should be mutually beneficial, protection for me, protection for you. But man, I've had some that are one-sided as all get out. And here's another benefit to go to like conferences and stuff. You'll get to sit through some Jeff King seminars, that guy knows how to.
He knows us out of the situation.
There's some stuff that we change. I think every time we hear him speak, we're taking notes and we're like, "Yep, this is what we're going to change about it."
Yeah, 100%. And it's just the wording and the structure of the sentence is very important too, right? So try to word it so that way it's not confusing to me or the client or whoever's reading it. But there is a certain way to have. Per Jeff's advice, there is a certain way to structure a sentence so that way it actually means what it's supposed to mean.
Well, we're in the part of the conversation when we're talking about settling disagreements where we're trying to avoid disagreements. That's this contract and negotiation phase on your jobs. Being clear and concise about what you're offering, which is what a contract does, and delivering upon those promises. But that first step, man, Jeff has brought it up, man. And he's been at CFI convention. He's been at TICE. He goes to all these things and he'll sit there and talk to you. Jeff would give you, he is retiring soon. Although I still bet you he hangs around every now and again because anytime you sit down with Jeff King to have a conversation, he's going to tell you about a flooring job. I mean, he knows this industry better than any attorney I've ever met. But you'll get some free advice from a $500 an hour lawyer just by going to, one of these conferences and hanging out with that guy.
Especially if you buy Luba a couple of drinks.
Yeah. Let's see. What does Alex say? He says, good luck in any state if you don't have a lawyer that's looked over all the verbiage and wording. Your contract is not worth what it's written on, especially when he can go to court. I think what I get from that is like, you better make sure that you understand the verbiage. I've read hundreds and hundreds of contracts, hundreds. I'd probably read at least 100 plus a year. We do about 300 to 500 jobs per year. I'll bet 100 of those are contracted. And so I bet I read probably 100 contracts a year. And the verbiage, luckily I get repeat clients. So it's the same contract with different exhibits, the scopes. And then all I got to do is make sure I'm reading through the scope, browse through the contract, make sure they didn't change anything. Most of the time they're templated, but the exhibits is where they put all the meat and potatoes of that particular job. So I agree with Alex. Make sure your attorney looks over the contract, the base contract that you're ever going to get. And we leverage our attorneys for those purposes. When we get a contract, we're like, man, this seems way too aggressive. But an attorney will also go overboard. You send a attorney a contract that thing comes back with so much red, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So
they're trying to protect you.
Yeah, they're only looking at it from one side. So it's tough to have the balance there. But you got to understand your risk factor, both as an installer or if you're a company that is, provide materials and labor. You got to understand your risk factor and how risky your company is. We're pretty risky from a company standpoint. We'll do projects with new customers and, we get pretty aggressive. We'll do them out of town. I mean, what'd you say?
So sorry if you guys can hear the office phone was ringing, and I just happened to have it like right on the other side of my laptop.
Yeah. Well, so, I did hear it, but
I have a question. I have a question for you. We're talking about these contracts, but like, how important is it to have the information, that's pertinent to the project up front and have the conversations up front about what is included, what is excluded, and maybe giving both sides, the client and us, our side, the opportunity to bring forth any questions and concerns prior to acceptance. Like how important is that? Residential, commercial?
I think, what Alex wrote there, as well as, our previous little bit of conversation on it, I think that that's the most important part. You don't have a job till you sign the contract. And so you're not obligated to nothing yet. You can't. So, there's a saying, and I'm sure you guys have heard it. Some of my best jobs are the ones I didn't do.
Oh yeah.
Right. Some of those jobs you wanted it so bad. And then you hear about it later and you're like, man, I'm glad I was not the winner on that sucker. Right. We've all had those. And so understanding and communicating and having a clear understanding of what you're supposed to do. I love Alex's approach that, like, even on residential jobs, give them a contract, formulate a contract, pay your attorney, get on the huddle and talk to Alex right here. I guarantee you he's got an attorney because he's pretty happy with the way it looks like it even wins him work.
Yeah, over other people just because, everything is laid out. Like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm not doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It takes a lot of the gray areas away. And, it's just like when you're going to actually install the job, right? What do you know as well as I do, being an efficient or a good sheet vinyl installer has not a lot to do with how fast you can move a knife. Like it's got mostly to do with how you set the job up, all your preparation for that, right? That's a lot of it. Like making sure that you have the areas to work, that you have that you have all of your you've scheduled all your roles, just everything like that, the setup. Well, it's the same with the contract. It's like the setup of the job, before you ever sign it, is, to me, paramount. I'm getting motivated now to even read my contracts a little bit deeper
Yeah, I
than
know.
what I
I was
have
just
been.
thinking
As
about that too.
I'm giving advice, I'm looking right back at myself and saying, man, I could do better there. But the truth is, that is the most important time of a job, is before you do it, making sure that it's agreed upon between both parties, and that if you can do it in writing. I know a lot of installers don't have contracts, and I think that, if Alex is laying out any good advice here, I should say Alex is clearly laying out some good advice.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you should have a contract, and there's multiple ways to get it, but big part of this is just making sure you know what you're doing, and you're really happy with the agreement before you go into it. Another thing, once you've made the agreement, stand by it, dude. Stand by your word. One of the things we can always hang our hat on is that we will finish your job. I'm not just going to let you fall off the edge of the cliff. I'm here to make sure that your job gets done. Now, I'm going to fight for some extra money or for a little more schedule or whatever the problem is, but stand by your agreements, but make sure it's a good one first.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, is to stand behind an agreement that could have had other variables involved, but in order to maintain that level of integrity you've worked so hard to get, it's easier sometimes just to bite your lip, and just get your head down, put your head down, and get to work, remedy it. If it's a small one, take care of it, shake their hand, and say sorry for the inconvenience. Have a nice day.
Right. And Lanny says that, 20 signatures or initials before you move forward, and people will probably look at that and be like, man, that's a ridiculous amount. But some of these contracts that we sign, it's sign here, initial at the bottom, because they need to make sure that you're getting every single page. Sign here, yes, I read this page. Sign here, this page is done.
Yeah.
Well, and all the
most of ours are like
too.
sign the main part and then initial
Right.
on every page. I would say that I like the contracts like Lanny was just talking about, that are require for, it's like they want to make sure that you're on the same page.
Right. And I think,
It's additional work. It can seem scary, but
what you can do is, right, you have your terms in there for the contract, and then you're like, did you understand this? Initial here. Did you understand that I am not going to be removing any asbestos? Sign here.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I like the kind of contracts that make it as clear as possible, but still mutually beneficial. And then when you start getting into the legal language of defaulting and these types of things, and termination for cause and termination for convenience and all these different scenarios, that's where it really needs to be,
if anybody's got
equitable.
great examples of the contract, I mean, this Alex, the way he's writing it, was making me start thinking, like, maybe the contract should be written to protect us, obviously to protect us, right, against certain things, but to favor, or to, I don't want to say appear, right, because the clients, we do want to favor them, right? We want to make sure they're covered and they understand they're covered and warranted, but maybe the verbiage in there should, be written in a manner where it's appear to be more heavily favorable for the client, with a couple guidelines, obviously, that we must
Well, the
follow.
contract, that's why it's mutually beneficial. You give a contract to a client, they can, even though it's your contract, they can hold you, their legal, they can legally hold you to the contract, even though it's yours, right? I mean, it's a mutual agreement. Having it written up so that your homeowner is protected, but it's very clear what you're offering and what you're paying for. I think that's what Alex
Mm-hmm.
was really pointing out. I seen a comment from Roland that said, "I remember the good old days when a handshake was your contract."
Or
Yeah.
that your word was your contract.
Oh, your
Yeah,
word
word,
was your
my word
contract.
is
Yeah. Well,
my word is my
that
bond. Remember that?
I still think it should be. It just can't govern a job because amnesia.
You know, I almost remember the day that your handshake was no longer good enough. If
Yeah.
that's crazy to think about, I almost remember that transition in mindset. It's like, what? But you said, like,
Well,
we've never had a problem, but
it's because you know there's so much to lose. There's so much to lose. And people got
yeah,
sick of losing and said, "Well, I need to write this thing down." I think it's a better way. I mean, I agree that I love the times when you can be like, "Yeah, I'll be there," and "All right, yeah, here, I'll pay you." you
Right.
know, but
Lanny says that he
um
thinks that it should be, making something that's small enough not to scare them off, but detailed enough so that it works for all parties.
mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, we this whole conversation
Kind of
went
swung.
towards the swung towards the contract side of the world, and we've done a pretty in-depth podcast on contracts, but it shows you how important all this is, and that how important your if if this, because this podcast is called, is talking about settling disputes. Even that, if you build your contract right, gives you the framework on how disputes are settled. Like, you know, that even that part can be put in the contract. So it depends on how hard you want it to be. I can also tell you, I get contracts from GCs that are like 2 pages or a one pager. Man, do I appreciate it.
yep,
you know, man, do I appreciate those. As long as the scope is part of that contract and it's saying you're going to provide these things for this amount of money, and they leave out all the other stuff, like it gives you that. That's as close as you get to what Roland was talking about these days, is those one pagers. There's just like, look, you're a good dude. I'm a good dude. We're going to do this thing together. Uh, that kind of thing. And you sign down here. It's a this size of job. I do love those. And those are typically the most enjoyable companies to work with, because you're typically working with an owner or someone high up at the company. It's the real big, huge general contractors that their
yes.
contract. We're doing one at 11 in Leavenworth right now that's went through 4 or 5 people's hands, baby. It's not even that big of a job. $130,000 project. Commercially, it's not a huge job.
Yeah,
It's a good
that's
sized
like
job.
just a
But
couple of days of work sometimes.
yeah, it's not a massive job, but it has went through multiple different layers of people and it's just massive company with in-house counsel. And you know I tell you, it's every I, every T. I mean, even down to our bond, when we sent our bond in, had like, if you don't have a seal, because we don't have a corporate seal that we stamp. Do you guys have a corporate seal?
No.
Most small businesses don't. I mean, I don't have a corporate seal. I mean, you can get one, but so it's never been a big deal. It's never ever came up. Your signature is your seal when you're a small
Yep.
business. Well, they made us sign a whole separate document stating that we didn't have a seal. I mean, it's gotten so over. Those are the ones that are tough, and I
You
don't
don't
I
have a
don't love, but
just get a candle and a ring, drip the hot candle on the paper, seal it with the ring, brother.
there you go. Yeah. So anyway, let's see. I'm gonna go through some comments in our contract. We talk about going down the. I think he said the
Just
bad and the ugly, not the bad and the ugly. I think
Yeah,
that's what he
just
meant.
saying
Yeah.
that, you're explaining everything, and if you're basically not willing to do what we say that needs to happen, then we're good. And I mean, realistically, that's how it should be anyways. It's just people have different ways to get that across. And do you need 22 pages or do you need 2 pages? It's
There you go.
how small and detailed you can get, right? It's if that works for you, definitely do it. If a 2-pager works for you, you do that. And it's
I think the longer you've been in the business, especially from the GC side, the bigger their contracts get. The longer they're in, the more complexity and all this stuff. And part of that, I think, is
Yeah.
just that they've been burned
Oh,
a time or
lost
two.
him.
Lost Daniel. Man down. They've been burned a time or two,
Yep.
and then
Man down.
and then added that to their contract. And before you know it, a 1-pager or 2-pager turns into a 10, 15, 20, 30-page contract. So
Right. And sometimes some of these
some hash.
attachments and like the bid docs and all the forms that come along with it have the contract from the corporation that the general's working for, and then they try to mimic that, and then they add their terms to it. And it's like you said, Jesus, the longer they've been around, the more
that's
they
on the
add.
GC side. And
And-
plus, but getting to what Alex, he's been commenting on, the contract being mutually beneficial should also, he's proof it will win you jobs, because he's stating right there that customers love the fact that everything's written out on paper, and that they I'm sure it makes him stand out. Some guy comes in and writes a quote on a piece of one of the quote books you get at the distributor's warehouse versus an actual professional contract. I'm sure that sets him apart. And I'm a big fan of what he's doing. All right, well, dudes, another hour on a Tuesday afternoon has flown by, and I think that the big takeaways for me is, there's dispute resolution, but where we landed or got really deep in the weeds is trying to find ways to minimize ever getting into the dispute. And it comes down to both parties understanding what you're offering and what you're charging.
Yeah, you gotta just
Yep.
it's all about that communication, and we'll say it every single time, but I think that's kind of where everything comes back to. It's communication. Communicate with your installer, communicate with the client, and then that's the only way things are going to get solved.
Yep. All right. Well, guys, we appreciate all the
Sometimes it's,
comments. We appreciate your insights and expertise. Frankly, I hope that helped some people that may not use contracts yet. And
Thank
really,
you, Alex.
yeah,
Holy smokes, you gave a lot of
we
information
appreciate
too.
that, and appreciate all the comments. Appreciate your appreciation, and we will catch you guys next week, same time. 3 p.m. Central every
4 p.m.
Tuesday
Eastern.
or Eastern.
The good
jump
time
on.
zone.
Yeah. Jump on, communicate with us. If you catch us on one of the channels, please like, subscribe, give us some love. Let us know any topics that you would like for us to cover. And last but not least, we will be at Tice. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff at Tice, so make sure you guys come out there. And thanks, Lanny. Appreciate it, buddy. Come out there and see us. We're going to be running the podcast. We're going to do some overtime episodes as usual, and pretty excited about getting back out to Tice. So with that, we will catch you guys next week.
All right. Take it easy, guys.